Welcome back to Cult Pop, folks. We've got another great show today. We've got two authors on today. We've got science fiction author David Williams, and he's going to talk about his Autumn Rain trilogy. That's going to be really cool. And then an old friend, Stefan Bucher, is going to be on, and he's talking about a new book he has, deals with photography and art, and it's the art of photography, I should say, and I think you'll really enjoy that. So we're going to have two really great segments on the show today. First up is David Williams. He's the author of the Autumn Rain trilogy. It's a really excellent military science fiction, action science fiction novel trilogy. The first novel in the book is Mirrored Heavens, and that's a really fantastic book. And then it's a planned trilogy. All three books are now out, so you folks will be able to get the books at your favorite bookstore or online seller. All three are out. And unlike a lot of trilogies where, the first book's sold well, let's write a second, then let's write a third, this was a planned trilogy right from the beginning. So I found that very interesting and really enjoyed the pacing of the books because of that. So David, welcome to the show today. We're really happy to have you on Cult Pop today.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jim. Appreciate it.
I absolutely loved your trilogy, Mirrored Heavens being the first book. And it's really... Your writing is a great blend of military science fiction plus action science fiction, but I also like the conspiracy and political elements in your novels, specifically the first book, and how there's a lot of politics and how the Eurasian, it's kind of like the U.S. and their people against the Eurasian political element, which is the whole rest of the world, basically. And your book starts off with a space elevator and a political plot, and right from the beginning, where the space elevator, this wonderful, magnificent scientific achievement from mankind, is destroyed in a terroristic attack, and then it's just action going from there, from the first page to the end. So I kind of give the how it started in the warm-up. Why don't you take us through the book from there?
Well, that was pretty much the gist of it, Jim, was, in addition to the military elements, I really grew up on a lot of Cold War fiction, particularly, Len Dayton, those guys. In fact, my agent ended up pitching these books as, quote, John le Carré on sci-fi crack. I don't know exactly what sci-fi crack is, but it sounded good to me. And it must have sounded good to Bantam as well when they bought the trilogy. But that was a lot of the idea I was going for. There was the double crosses, the backstabs, the question of identity about, it was complicated enough being a secret agent in the 20th century. What's it going to be like in the 22nd century when memories can get erased and your bosses may already have been turned to the other side? So it's set within the framework of that second Cold War, where you have a new Eastern superpower and space has been weaponized. But there's also, to your point about the elevator, a bit of the contemporary going on here, in that we have a terrorist organization, Autumn Rain, that makes Al-Qaeda look like a little bit like the Teletubbies. And, they've brought down the elevator. They're trying to trigger war between the two superpowers. They're threatening a second strike. And it's up to our protagonists to stop them. And as you said, that's a quest that really goes on across and builds across three books, across an entire trilogy.
David, when I opened the show, I said that I like the fact that this was a planned trilogy. And I think it really shows in the pacing of the first book and then continues right along into the second and the third. You see that you're building to bigger things, but in some books, and we had a discussion off air a couple of different times where you talked about that was important to you, that people know that it was a planned trilogy, that it's not a book that sold well and then, let's do the second, and let's do, hey, that sold well, let's do a third. You had a story arc in your mind right from the beginning.
Yeah, and I think important to note that the first book doesn't simply end on a cliffhanger. I think you can do that with the second book, but the first book, it wraps up enough endings so that someone who wanted to kind of get off the train at that point, so to speak, could feel, okay, the plot did end, even though there's lots of doors open for a second and third book. But it was always designed, actually it was originally designed as a giant 2,000-page book, back when I had zero idea of any market realities, and eventually I realized, hey, I've got to split this up into a series of books. But I think the other part of that is that, there is an ending. I mean, this is, and that was something that was hard for me to write. But I think we have a few, frankly, too many never-ending series in science fiction right now, in fantasy, where you sense that the authors, are going to have trouble saying goodbye to their characters, and there might be some subconscious resistance there. That's resistance I understand, and I really wanted, though, to end this book, to bring it all to a close with a trilogy, with a third book that really topped the other two and made everything sort of end with a bang. And so, the continuation of the Mirrored Heavens occurs in the Burning Skies, and then the Machinery of Light, where you literally have World War III in space between the East and West, and yet even that's just the backdrop to this broader question of, well, who are Autumn Rain and what do they want? And believe it or not, that's actually something far more encompassing than total war across the Earth-Moon system.
Yes, that's obviously one of the themes that goes through all three is what is their agenda, what is Autumn Rain's final game plan, and I found that riveting to kind of follow. I want to talk a little bit about Claire Haskell. I thought she's a great protagonist, very interesting character, and she's somebody, without giving too much away, that we see throughout the series, and I just absolutely loved her, loved the character. Let's talk a little bit about her and how she helps drive the stories.
Well, she's in many ways, as you point out there, Jim, the central character. I mean, she is. I don't want to sort of give away the spoilers here. I mean, you know what I'm referring to. But she is, I think, the most likable character. She's certainly the only character who really would like to have a normal life, and Claire's tragedy is that she never will. She'll never be allowed to. I mean, she's forced at the beginning of book one to work with her one-time lover, Jason Marlowe, who she hasn't seen in 10 years. They're two of the agents who are assigned to stop Autumn Rain, to find them before they strike again. And yet they realize early on, and this is on the back cover, so I'm not really giving anything away, that their spy master handlers have been manipulating their memories. So, imagine being put in the room with someone who you used to be in love with, you used to be lovers, and now suddenly you think, gee, did any of that ever really happen? So it's a little of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind meets James Bond going on there. And, she'd like to be able to trust Jason Marlowe, but how can she really when she can't even trust her own memories on the subject? And for Claire, things just get more and more complicated from there. She is, I should note, what I call a razor, so she's a hacker, whereas Marlowe is a mechanic, a physical warrior, someone who kicks down the doors and enters fortresses, and the two of them are supposed to team up. And of course, the best laid plans never quite go as they should, much to Claire's chagrin.
Yeah, well, I absolutely loved Claire. Great character. You've created a really exciting, fun centerpiece for the books, and I really enjoyed her. And I wanted to give you a compliment. I passed your books on to a friend of mine who's not normally into science fiction, but he's into military books, thrillers, things like that, history. And I passed your three novels on, and he really loved them. And he's not a science fiction reader, and I think that goes well. I want the folks at home to really realize if you're a straight out science fiction fan, grab this book. But if we've had a lot of thriller authors and things like that on here, this is absolutely a book that you're going to enjoy because you have so many great elements. The thriller, the political action that's going on here, the behind the scenes stuff that's going on in the three books. But you've done a great job of blending military science fiction in general, and then all of the elements that make us science fiction fans really enjoy books, but you brought all these other elements in, and you've really done a magnificent job with this trilogy.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, Jim. Those are kind words. I mean, I think it probably is worth noting that, while I'm, someone who would gladly fall on my sword for science fiction, I probably read more history than I do science fiction at the end of the day. And I think that's reflected. I mean, the first thing I did when I was writing these books is to actually write the timeline to sort of say, well, what's going to happen across the next 100 years? And it does seem to me that there is kind of that that strange middle area when you look at science fiction. I mean, that middle area between the techno thrillers, the contemporary techno thrillers of Tom Clancy and those kind of books, and then science fiction, which, insofar as it hasn't sort of run off towards fantasy and vampires, is concentrating much more on the space opera, on the far future things, the sort of things that authors like Alistair Reynolds does so well. And it struck me in writing this that there was this gap between those two of near future, and yet that is in some ways the critical period. I mean, that's the next 100 years are going to determine, really, not to get all melodramatic here, but the fate of our species. And so that was where I really wanted to set these books and to say, okay, you can see the future of war right now. You can see, we're using unmanned airplanes over Iraq and Afghanistan. But what's next? What's around the corner? What are the next 50 years? What are those things going to look like in another half century? That's really what I was trying to do with these books. And I think that may be what your friend responded to, that in a certain sense, they're not intended to be science fiction. They're more intended to be, science fact, what really could end up being around the corner.
Right. And I absolutely really enjoyed it. David, I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up your website. Tell folks at home, we've got a minute and a half, 2 minutes left. Tell folks at home about your website, because you've got an excellent website that talks a lot about the books, but also a blog, different things going on, some interactive stuff with your books. Let's talk a little bit about that real quick.
Sure, just briefly, it's www.autumnrain2110, as in the year 2110.com. Although you can find me just by Googling David J. Williams or The Mirrored Heavens or the Autumn Rain books, and it takes you to the website. But the idea was really to sort of create, rather than have your typical website, which just kind of features, photos of the author and that sort of thing, was to really sort of provide a window into the world of the early 22nd century. So maps, geopolitical readouts, blueprints of hardware, of technology, dossiers as to the characters, to really sort of give them that window. And a number of artist friends of mine pitched in and helped out, because I can't draw at all. But I was fortunate in having those friends who sort of helped me put that together and really provide almost paratextual content, additional content that someone who is reading the books can then sort of dive into and say, oh, okay, well, that's what those machines look like. It's not necessary to go to. It's not an integral part of the book, but it is still canon. It is still part of that trilogy, and also a good way to immerse oneself in the world of Autumn Rain.
Yeah, David, I think it's an excellent bonus to anybody who reads the book to head to your website and take a look. But we're up just about out of time here, David. I wanted to thank you so much for being on the show. We've had your website up throughout the show so people can visit. And of course, it's linked at our Cult Pop site so people can get there from our site. We're so happy to have you on today. And when you come out with new books, let's get you on again. You've been a great guest.
Thanks again, Jim. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Okay, David. Folks, stay tuned for more Cult Pop. Welcome back to Cult Pop. With me now is a past guest that you folks absolutely loved. I got a lot of emails about how much you enjoyed Stefan on his last visit. Well, now he's on the show for something different. Stefan Bucher has got a new book out, The Graphic Eye. And this time, instead of being about monsters, it's about wonderful photos taken, graphic artists taking photos of every imaginable thing in every imaginable place. It's really something spectacular. Stefan, thanks so much for being on the show again. We absolutely loved your work with 100 Days of Monsters. Still one of my favorite websites, one of my favorite books out there. You've done something really spectacular with that, and now you've hit another one out of the park with The Graphic Eye. Thanks so much for being on the show today, buddy.
Thank you very much for having me, Jim. It's great to be back on the show.
Stefan, it's really interesting to me, your newest book, The Graphic Eye. Here you are. We got to know you the last time on the show as being this wonderful graphic artist that has a wonderful website with monsters, and you're getting a great following doing that. Well, here's this whole new side of you as an artist with photographs. And The Graphic Eye, as people are seeing images now are just these wonderful, it's a book of wonderful photographs taken from all types of different graphic artists and just from all over the world. What was the brainchild? Where did you come up with this brainchild? How did this idea come about?
Well, it was a combination of things. I had been designing a few photo books for clients over the years. And, you're saying that this is a new side of me. Basically, this is really what I do during the day when I'm not doing the monsters, is that that I'm a graphic designer. And so I was working on photo books and looking also at the sort of all the digital snapshots that I take, and sort of in moments of hubris think, hey man, these are pretty good. And I thought, you know what, probably every one of my graphic designer friends has a whole folder full of these things that never get seen because they usually, because none of us are professional photographers. And it probably, you couldn't put out a show of your own work that way. But I thought, if we all get together and if we pick the best of everybody's photos, it's probably a pretty amazing collection of stuff. And that's how the graphic eye came about.
Excellent. While you've been talking, we've seen a couple of the images. The folks at home will have seen some of the amazing images in this book. I assume you must have some favorites, either because of the story of the picture or the story from the person taking the picture. Can you tell us about a few of the favorite images of yours in this book?
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite series is Marion Bonch's shots of hotel rooms. She is she's an amazing graphic designer, and her website is bonchis.com, and she travels all over the world to speak, and every town she goes to, the first thing she does is she takes photos of the hotel room she's in. And so she just has this great comprehensive series of beautiful hotel rooms from around the world, which I just think is fascinating to look at because it's almost like a visual diary. That's one of my favorites. Jakob Trollbeck, an amazing motion graphics designer from New York, just takes gorgeous photos of New York. And specifically, he calls the series Looking Up. So it's just him looking up at all the things in New York that are fascinating to him, and he just shoots them beautifully and gets this really sort of modern, eerie quality to them in the way he has the colors with it. And then there are photos of people in chicken suits, and that is, let me look it up because I want to give you the right name. That is, because there's so many that I don't want to get it wrong. That is by Carla Faye Bauman. I'm looking at it right here. And one of the things that was the great joy about this was not knowing what was going to come in. Because when I first started the project, I thought, well, I'm going to ask graphic designers for photos. So what it's going to be is lots and lots of photos of street signs and typography out in the world. And to be sure, there was some of that, but the variety was just amazing.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many neat, a couple of my favorites, and there's hundreds of pictures to choose from, so I'm just going to give you a couple of random. Paul White, there's an amazing photo of the Vegas skyline, but then the reflection of the person in the mirror, and there's the person in the mirror, or in the glass, is wearing the most random looking shirt, and I just absolutely love that photo. I keep on coming back to that. That's by Paul White. I think that's pretty spectacular. And then being a big Bob Marley fan, I was really pleasantly surprised to come across numerous shots from a Bob Marley concert in 1975 by Michael Hodgson. I thought that was also pretty cool. But it's one of literally hundreds of just unique and amazing photos. And I'm curious, as we got to know you, as I mentioned earlier, through the 100 Days of Monsters, I guess realizing this is your full-time, you say this is your full-time gig, is there an artistic, when you're doing the 100 Days of Monsters, you must get a completely different feeling of both fan interaction and how people really love that on the website to this book? What type of fan reaction do you have, and how does it make you feel as an artist to complete something like this?
This is, doing the graphic eye is very comforting to me, because this is very much my home turf, and it is, the monsters are, how to say this, they're both really cool, challenging jobs. The monsters are more live without a net, whereas the graphic eye, the great joy is that I really get to think about it for a long time, and I really get to construct everything artistically. For me, the great pleasure, other than just receiving all those amazing images, is being able to go through, making a selection, curating a show, essentially, and then spending an inordinate amount of time putting together a sequence that I think is evocative and tells a little story. I mean, obviously not a sort of a linear story, but when you go through the book, there is always a connection from one page to the next, and there are whole sequences that, to my mind, tell a story. And so they're two totally separate parts of my sort of artistic personality, and at the same time it always comes back to just trying to tell a story, or at least creating something that lets people imagine that there's a story.
Yeah, I like the way you describe that, because this really is the perfect coffee table book, or book to just have around to spark discussions. As we're conducting this interview, I'm skimming through the book again, and I'm realizing how much I enjoy. I mentioned Paul White earlier, but I'm seeing some images he's done from Scotland. There's looks like a farmhouse or some type of cottage out by a river, and just all these beautiful pictures that really do, so many of them, you can just, my mind starts going and creating its own story of what's going on and what's there. So This really is just a unique book in the sense that it's beautiful photography, but as great photographs are able to do, they all seem to can tell a story to each individual person that may be its own. I may get a different story from it looking at it than you do, but I just think it's absolutely amazing. You've really come up with something unique and amazing again that I really, really enjoy in this book. Do you expect, was this a one-time thing, Stefan, or could we see more books like this in the future?
I'm hoping to do more. I mean, this is really the kind of book, the graphic eye, that I do a lot for clients. So I do a lot of books like this. I did the American Photography 17 annual. I did a book for the photographer Jonah Frank called Right, Portraits from the Evangelical Ivy League. And I do a lot of exhibition catalogs for LA Louvre, a gallery here in Los Angeles. So I'll be making more books. Will I be making them under my own name? I hope so. It sort of depends on how well this does, and just on when I have the next idea. The next two books I'm doing are completely different. The one I'm working on right now is a book on dating and relationships. It's an illustrated book on dating and relationships called You Deserve a Medal. And then after that, I'm going to do a graphic design book that's like a designer self-help book called 344 Questions. That will be sort of a self-help, do-it-yourself analysis tool about your life. Because I like to start small.
You've got all kinds of interesting things coming, so we'll obviously be having you on the show again and again as these books come out. But I want to mention to the folks at home, you've been seeing images, you've been hearing from us, Stefan Bucher. The Graphic Eye is the name of the book, and you've been seeing images of the Graphic Eye throughout this interview. And the great thing, if you go pick up the book, each and every photograph, if you go to the back, it tells you who the person is that wrote it, and different websites to go to see more. So if you could potentially either purchase this picture or purchase other pictures by the artist taking these. So it really is something spectacular. And Stefan, before we run out of time, absolutely love the Graphic Eye, but I would be remiss because I know a lot of people are going to watch this hoping to hear about 100 Days of Monsters again. Tell the folks about the website again, the 100 Days of Monsters, and can we expect anything new in the monster department anytime soon?
Oh, absolutely. Work on the monsters continues. Currently, I have a series going called The Daily Monster Papers, where there's a new monster drawing every night. That's still at dailymonster.com. I'm working on a portfolio of large-scale monster drawings that's going to go on sale later in the year. We're going to do sort of a monster color form package pretty soon. And there are a few sort of Monster Skunkworks things going on. So there's lots of new monsters coming.
Excellent. And I want to mention to folks at home, when you go to that website, you're still selling, you can buy prints and originals from you, which I think is really cool, that you'll do an original monster for people at the website, and all they need to do is go there and they can get all the information and contact you about that stuff, correct?
That's correct, yeah. And if you want to buy original drawings or prints or any of that, there's a link on dailymonster.com, or you can also go to store344.com.
Okay, excellent. Well, Stefan, we're really glad to have you on the show again. You're one of our favorite guests. You've got so much interesting, unique stuff going on. And when you have these next novels coming out, please contact us and we'll have you on again to talk about those.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's always a pleasure to be on the show.
Okay, thanks, buddy. Okay, folks, you've been watching Cult Pop, and we hope to see you next time. And remember, always check out our website, and you can learn everything about the guests you've seen today. And links to their websites are always available, and you can rewatch the episode you've just seen. Just go to www.cult-pop.com. Thanks for watching.